My parents disappeared for 7 years. Then my sister showed off my penthouse, and my dad immediately called saying he saw her post and they needed help with mom's cancer treatment bills. Melissa had posted photos from her baby shower at my apartment, accidentally showing the lake view and my renovated kitchen. And within 2 hours, my dad was crying on the phone about how proud they were of me. The same dad who vanished when I was 19 and pregnant, taking my younger sister to live in Colorado with his girlfriend, was now swearing he always believed in me. I responded, "You chose Melissa 7 years ago. Stick with your choice," and blocked his number. Standing in my Chicago penthouse that afternoon, watching Lake Michigan glitter 20 floors below, I felt nothing but cold satisfaction as I pressed the block button. My phone buzzed 3 more times with unknown numbers before I finally turned it off completely. Melissa's panicked texts kept coming through on my laptop. "Victoria, please. Dad says you hung up on him. Mom is really sick. We need you." I deleted each message without reading past the first line. The baby shower decorations still hung from my exposed brick walls, pink balloons drifting lazily in the air conditioning. Melissa had begged to use my place for the party, claiming her apartment was too small and she wanted something special for her first baby. Against my better judgment, I had said yes. Now I understood why she had been so insistent on taking photos in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, why she had made such a show of videoing the marble countertops and custom cabinetry in my kitchen. 7 years ago, I was a pregnant 19-year-old college dropout, abandoned in a studio apartment with a notice of eviction taped to the door. My parents had chosen sides when I refused to terminate my pregnancy. When I insisted on keeping the baby my boyfriend denied was his. Dad sat me down in that same studio apartment, his face hard as granite, and told me I was making a choice that would ruin my life. When I did not bend, he packed his bags, took 13-year-old Melissa, and moved to Denver with Patricia, the woman from his office he had been seeing for months. Mom followed 3 days later, leaving behind a note that said she could not watch me destroy my future. The apartment lease was in their names. I had 60 days before I would be homeless. The eviction came faster than expected. 32 days after they left, I was loading everything I owned into my friend Rachel's trunk. My daughter Sophia was 2 weeks old, tiny and perfect and utterly dependent on me. I had $400 in my bank account, no job, and a high school diploma. Rachel let me sleep on her couch for 3 months while I worked double shifts at a call center. Sophia strapped to my chest in a carrier during every break. During those nightmare months, I called my parents exactly once. Dad answered on the 5th ring, Colorado wind audible in the background. I told him I was struggling, that Sophia needed formula and diapers, that I just needed help getting on my feet. He asked if I had reconsidered adoption. When I said no, he told me he had made his choice clear, and now I needed to live with mine. The line went dead. I never called again. But I kept moving forward. The call center job led to a customer service position at a tech startup. The customer service role taught me the software inside and out. Within a year, I was training new employees. Within 2 years, I was managing the entire support department. When the company was acquired by a larger firm, they offered me a position in their Chicago headquarters with a salary that made my hands shake when I saw the offer letter. Sophia was 3 when we moved to Chicago. I enrolled her in a good daycare near my new office and found us a small but safe apartment in Lincoln Park. I worked 70-hour weeks, learning everything I could about software development, project management, and business operations. My managers noticed. Promotions came steadily. By the time Sophia started kindergarten, I was director of operations with a 6-figure salary and stock options that were actually worth something. The penthouse came 2 years ago, after another acquisition and another promotion. Vice President of Strategic Operations at 24 felt surreal. The 3-bedroom unit on Michigan Avenue felt like a castle after years of cramped apartments and constant financial anxiety. Sophia got her own room with windows overlooking the lake. I got a home office with custom built-in shelves for my growing collection of business books. We got safety and stability and a life my parents said I would never have. During all of this, my parents lived their lives in Colorado. Dad married Patricia in a small ceremony I learned about through a mutual acquaintance's social media post. Melissa graduated high school, started community college, dropped out after a semester. I knew these details only because I occasionally checked their public profiles, a habit I told myself I would break, but never did. They never checked mine. They never knew about the promotions, the penthouse, or the life I had built from nothing. Melissa reconnected with me 18 months ago through a Facebook message that was clearly designed to seem casual. She mentioned she was thinking about moving to Chicago, asked if I had any advice about neighborhoods, I should have ignored it. Instead, some stupid part of me that remembered braiding her hair when she was little made me respond. We met for coffee. She cried when she saw Sophia, now a confident 6-year-old with my dark eyes and her absent father's dimples. She apologized for not reaching out sooner, claimed she had wanted to, but Dad forbade it. I did not fully believe her, but I allowed the relationship to resume at a careful distance. Melissa did move to Chicago 3 months later, taking a job as a receptionist at a dental office. We saw each other every few weeks, always at my initiation, always with me maintaining firm boundaries. She never mentioned our parents. I appreciated that silence. The baby shower request came 6 weeks ago. Melissa was 5 months pregnant, the father already gone, and she looked so young and scared when she asked if she could host the party at my place. I saw myself at 19 in her frightened eyes. I said yes. I even helped pay for the decorations and catering, telling myself I was being the support system for her that no one had been for me. Now I understood that every kind gesture had been reconnaissance. Every coffee date where she asked about my work was intelligence gathering. Every time she admired my apartment, she was calculating its value. The baby shower had not been about celebrating her pregnancy. It had been about broadcasting my success to the family that had abandoned me, creating leverage for an eventual ask. My laptop pinged with another message. This one was from Mom's Facebook account, the first direct contact from her in 7 years. Victoria, please. The cancer is stage 3. The treatments are expensive. We're drowning in bills. You're the only one who can help us. I know we hurt you, but I'm your mother. Please. I clicked on her profile, breaking my usual rule about not looking. The photos showed a thin woman with gray hair and hollow cheeks, dramatically different from the vibrant person who had walked out of my life. Dad looked older too, his face lined with stress that might have been real, or might have been performed for sympathy. Melissa appeared in several recent photos, her pregnant belly prominent, always positioned between our parents like a bridge. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. They had sent Melissa to Chicago to re-establish contact. They had waited until she was pregnant and sympathetic before making their move. They had used my own apartment, my own hospitality, to gather evidence of wealth that could be extracted. The entire reconnection had been a calculated operation with a single goal: access to my money when they eventually needed it. My phone, still off, sat on the kitchen counter next to a photo from the baby shower. Melissa was in the center, glowing and grateful, surrounded by the friends I had invited and the food I had purchased. She was looking directly at the camera with an expression I could now decode. Not joy at her celebration, but satisfaction at a mission accomplished. She had gotten the photos she needed. She had proven to our parents that their abandoned daughter had become worth their attention. The sun was setting over the lake, painting my living room in shades of gold and amber. Sophia would be home soon from her after-school program. I needed to decide how to handle this situation before she walked through the door, before my carefully constructed peace was shattered by people who had forfeited their right to disrupt it years ago. But the decision was already made. I had made it 7 years ago when I chose to keep my daughter despite their demands. I had reinforced it with every overnight shift, every skipped meal, every moment I chose survival over surrender. I had carved it into stone with every promotion earned, every obstacle overcome, every day I proved their predictions wrong. They had made their choice when I was 19 and desperate. Now I was making mine. The difference was, I had the power they lacked. I had resources they needed. And I had absolutely no intention of sharing any of it. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to my attorney. If they were going to escalate the situation, I wanted protection in place. If Melissa was going to continue messaging, I wanted documentation of harassment. If my parents thought their sudden reappearance entitled them to anything I had built, they were going to learn exactly how wrong they were. The phone stayed off. The messages stayed unread. And I felt nothing but clarity as I watched the Chicago skyline light up against the darkening sky, knowing that the only family that mattered was already on her way home to me. The harassment escalated within 48 hours. My work email, which I had never given to any of them, received a message from Dad with the subject line, "Please read, life or death." I forwarded it to my attorney without opening it. My building's front desk called to inform me that a woman claiming to be my mother had tried to access my floor, insisting she needed to speak with me urgently about a family emergency. Security escorted her out when she refused to leave. The doorman, Marcus, apologized profusely, but I thanked him for following protocol exactly as designed. Melissa showed up at Sophia's school on Wednesday afternoon. The principal called me immediately, following the instructions I had placed in Sophia's file years ago regarding approved pickup persons. When I arrived, Melissa was sitting in the administrative office, tears streaming down her face, one hand on her pregnant belly in a gesture of maximum sympathy appeal. The principal, Mrs. Chen, stood between Melissa and the door leading to the classrooms with her arms crossed. She claims she's your sister and Sophia's aunt, Mrs. Chen explained quietly while Melissa continued her performance in the background. She says there's a family medical emergency and she needs to take Sophia to see her grandmother before it's too late. I looked at Melissa through the glass partition. She met my eyes with a mixture of desperation and calculation that confirmed every suspicion. Using my daughter as leverage was a line I had not expected her to cross this quickly, but it clarified the situation perfectly. Whatever sisterly affection I had tentatively rebuilt over the past 18 months died completely in that moment. She is not authorized to have any contact with my daughter, I stated clearly, loud enough for Melissa to hear through the glass. If she returns to this property, I want the police called immediately. I will be filing a restraining order this afternoon. Melissa stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the linoleum floor. Victoria, please. Mom is dying. She just wants to meet her granddaughter before she goes. How can you be so heartless? The principal stepped forward, positioning herself more firmly between us. I kept my voice level and cold. You used my home to spy on me. You exploited my kindness to gather information for people who abandoned me 7 years ago. Now you're attempting to use my daughter as an emotional hostage. The answer is no. It will remain no regardless of how many scenes you create or how many people you send to harass me. We're family, Melissa choked out, her hand moving to cradle her belly again. Doesn't that mean anything to you? You stopped being my family when you helped them find me, I replied. You knew exactly what you were doing when you posted those photos. You knew they would see my apartment and suddenly remember I existed. This entire reconnection was a setup, and we both know it. Her face transformed then, the tears drying up as rage replaced performance. You have everything. A penthouse, a great job, money to spare. Mom needs $60,000 for her treatment. $60,000 that you probably spend on furniture and vacations. She's your mother, Victoria. She gave you life. She gave me life and then took away her support when I needed it most, I said quietly. I was 19, pregnant, and terrified, and she chose your father's girlfriend over her own grandchild. That was her decision. These are the consequences. Mrs. Chen placed a firm hand on my shoulder. I think it's time for you to leave, Miss Reed. Security is on their way. Melissa grabbed her purse, her movements sharp with fury. You're going to regret this. When Mom dies because you were too selfish to help, you'll have to live with that forever. And Sophia will grow up knowing her mother chose money over family. Sophia will grow up knowing her mother chose her over people who would exploit her, I corrected. Now get out before I have you arrested for attempted parental interference. Security arrived as Melissa stormed past them, her shoulder deliberately knocking into the guard's arm. Mrs. Chen walked me to Sophia's classroom, where my daughter sat reading quietly at her desk, completely unaware of the drama that had just unfolded. She looked up when I entered, her face brightening instantly. Mom, you're early! She bounded over, wrapping her arms around my waist. Can we get ice cream on the way home? Absolutely, I agreed, smoothing her dark curls. Let's get your stuff. That evening, after Sophia was asleep, I sat in my home office with my attorney on speakerphone. Jeffrey Mitchell had handled my real estate transactions and employment contracts for 3 years. He was expensive, precise, and utterly unsentimental about family drama. Based on what you've described, we have grounds for restraining orders against all 3 of them, Jeffrey explained, his keyboard clicking in the background. The attempted school pickup is particularly serious. That demonstrates intent to access your minor child without authorization, which courts take very seriously. How long will the orders last? I asked, making notes on my own legal pad. Temporary orders can be issued within 24 hours. Permanent orders require a hearing, usually within 2 weeks. Given the documented harassment at your workplace, residence, and your child's school, along with the 7-year abandonment history, I'm confident we'll get the permanent orders approved. What if they claim I'm denying them access to my mother during a medical crisis? The question tasted bitter, but I needed to know the legal vulnerabilities. Jeffrey paused his typing. Victoria, you're an adult with no legal obligation to provide financial support to your parents. Illinois doesn't have filial responsibility laws. Even if it did, the fact that they voluntarily severed their relationship when you were a dependent minor would likely exempt you. Their medical bills are not your responsibility legally or ethically. They're going to make this as public and ugly as possible, I said, staring at the lake beyond my windows. My father has already found my work email. They know where I live and where Sophia goes to school. They're not going to accept no for an answer. Then we make the cost of continued harassment higher than any potential benefit, Jeffrey replied calmly. Tomorrow morning, I'll file for the restraining orders and send cease and desist letters to all 3 of them. Any further contact will be documented as violation of the order, which carries criminal penalties. We'll also send a letter to your HR department explaining the situation so they can flag any attempts to contact you through work channels. After we ended the call, I poured myself a glass of wine and stood at the windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. The city stretched out below, millions of lights marking millions of lives, each one containing their own complications and betrayals. Somewhere in that sprawl, Melissa was probably calling our parents, reporting that the mission had failed, that I was not going to be the easy mark they had anticipated. My phone, now back on but with all their numbers blocked, showed 17 missed calls from unknown numbers and 12 voicemails I had not listened to. The visual voicemail transcripts were enough. Variations on the theme of family obligation, medical emergency, and moral failure. Dad's messages were angry, accusing me of heartlessness and greed. Mom's were weepy and manipulative, claiming she just wanted to see her granddaughter before she died. Melissa's were pure venom, calling me every ugly name she could think of while simultaneously begging me to reconsider. I deleted them all without listening. Their words had no power anymore. They were strangers who happened to share my DNA, nothing more. The next morning, Jeffrey moved with impressive speed. By noon, temporary restraining orders were filed against David Reed, Patricia Reed, and Melissa Reed. By 3, cease and desist letters were sent via email and certified mail. By 5, my HR director had flagged their names in the company's security system and assured me that any attempted contact through work channels would be immediately reported to building security and documented for legal purposes. I went home that evening feeling lighter than I had in days. Sophia and I made pasta together, her standing on a stool at the counter while she narrated an elaborate story about her day at school. We ate dinner watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of pink and orange. We read 3 chapters of her current favorite book before bed. We existed in our protected bubble, safe from people who would drain our peace for their own benefit. But I knew this was only the beginning. People who were desperate enough to track down my work email and show up at my daughter's school were not going to disappear quietly just because a lawyer sent them letters. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for Thursday morning, 2 weeks after Melissa's stunt at Sophia's school. I arrived at the courthouse with Jeffrey, dressed in a navy suit that projected exactly the professional competence I wanted the judge to see. We had prepared meticulously, compiling every email, every voicemail transcript, every documented attempt at contact into a thick folder that told an undeniable story of harassment. David, Patricia, and Melissa sat on the opposite side of the courtroom with a legal aid attorney who looked fresh out of law school and completely overwhelmed by the documentation Jeffrey had filed. Mom was not present, which I noted immediately. If she was truly dying of stage 3 cancer, her absence from a hearing about access to her daughter and granddaughter was conspicuous. The judge, a gray-haired woman named Justice Sarah Mitchell, reviewed our filings with an expression that gave nothing away. When she finally looked up, her gaze moved between me and my father, with the careful assessment of someone who had seen every variation of family dysfunction. Mr. Reed, she addressed my father directly, you're requesting that I deny the restraining order on the grounds that you have a legitimate right to contact your daughter regarding your wife's medical emergency. Is that correct? Dad stood, his hands clasped in front of him in a posture of humility that made my jaw tighten. Yes, Your Honor. My wife is very ill. She's asking to see our daughter and granddaughter before she passes. We didn't handle things perfectly 7 years ago. I admit that. But surely a person's impending death justifies reaching out to family for support. And where is your wife today? Justice Mitchell asked pointedly. Dad faltered. She's undergoing treatment. The chemotherapy makes her very weak. Travel is difficult, but not impossible apparently, since according to the security report filed by the defendant, Patricia Reed attempted to access the defendant's residential building just last week. If your wife is too ill to attend a legal proceeding about access to her own daughter, I question how she's healthy enough to be demanding in-person visits. The legal aid attorney stood quickly, clearly trying to salvage the situation. Your Honor, my clients acknowledge that their approach may have been overly persistent, but their intentions come from a place of genuine medical crisis and family concern. Justice Mitchell held up one hand. I've read the defendant's filing, counselor, 7 years of zero contact. No child support payments during that time despite the mother being a teenage single parent. No birthday cards, no holiday calls, no acknowledgement of the granddaughter's existence until 3 weeks ago, when these parents discovered via social media that their daughter had achieved significant financial success. The timing is not lost on me. She turned to me. Ms. Reed, you're requesting permanent restraining orders against your father, his wife, and your sister. That's a serious step. Can you explain to the court why you believe this level of legal protection is necessary? I stood, grateful for the hours of preparation that steadied my voice. Your Honor, when I was 19 years old and pregnant, my parents gave me an ultimatum: terminate the pregnancy or lose their support. When I refused, they moved to Colorado and cut off all contact. My father explicitly told me on the phone that he had made his choice and I needed to live with mine. For 7 years, I built a life for myself and my daughter without any assistance or acknowledgement from them. They were not interested in reconciliation or family connection during the years when I was struggling. They became interested exactly when my sister posted photographs of my home that demonstrated I had become financially successful. And the sister's role in this? Justice Mitchell asked, glancing at Melissa. My sister reconnected with me 18 months ago, claiming she wanted to repair our relationship. I allowed limited contact, always maintaining boundaries. 6 weeks ago, she asked to host her baby shower at my apartment. I agreed. She used that access to photograph my home and post the images on social media where my parents would see them. Within 2 hours of her posting, my father called demanding money for my mother's cancer treatment. When I refused, the harassment escalated to attempts to access my workplace, my home, and most seriously, my daughter's school. My sister attempted to remove my daughter from school property without authorization, claiming a family emergency. Melissa jumped to her feet. That's not what happened. I just wanted Sophia to meet her grandmother before she died. Sit down, Ms. Reed, Justice Mitchell said sharply. You'll have an opportunity to speak if your attorney chooses to call you as a witness. The legal aid attorney looked at Melissa with barely concealed frustration before turning back to the judge. Your Honor, my clients admit their methods may have been misguided, but surely there's a middle ground here. Perhaps supervised visitation or mediated communication through attorneys. What's the current status of your wife's cancer treatment, Mr. Reed? Justice Mitchell asked my father directly. Another hesitation. She's between treatment cycles right now. The doctors are evaluating next steps. And the $60,000 you're requesting from your daughter? How was that amount determined? Dad's face reddened. That's what we need to cover the next round of treatments and the outstanding medical bills. Justice Mitchell made a note on her legal pad. I'm going to review the medical documentation you've submitted regarding your wife's condition. Ms. Reed's attorney, do you have anything to add? Jeffrey stood smoothly. Your Honor, I would note that my client has no legal obligation to provide financial support to her parents under Illinois law. Furthermore, the pattern of contact demonstrates that the medical situation, while potentially real, is being used as leverage to extract money from a daughter these parents voluntarily abandoned when she was a vulnerable teenager. The attempt to access the minor child at school is particularly concerning, as it demonstrates a willingness to use Ms. Reed's daughter as an emotional hostage. I agree completely, Justice Mitchell said crisply. Mr. Reed, your argument might have merit if you had maintained any relationship with your daughter over the past 7 years. You might have grounds to request consideration if you had provided any support when she was raising your granddaughter alone as a teenager. But you chose to sever that relationship when your daughter made a decision you disagreed with. You don't get to resurrect family obligations selectively when it becomes financially convenient. She flipped through the file again. I'm granting the permanent restraining orders as requested. David Reed, Patricia Reed, and Melissa Reed are prohibited from contacting Victoria Reed or her minor daughter through any means. This includes phone, email, social media, in-person contact, and third-party intermediaries. You are prohibited from coming within 500 feet of Ms. Reed's residence, workplace, or her daughter's school. Violation of this order will result in immediate arrest and criminal charges. Dad's face went from red to white. Your Honor, please. We're her family. You were her family, Justice Mitchell corrected coldly. You voluntarily relinquished that role 7 years ago. This hearing is concluded. Outside the courthouse, Jeffrey shook my hand with visible satisfaction. That went better than expected. Mitchell is known for being tough on parental abandonment cases. Your father's inability to produce convincing medical documentation probably helped. You think they were lying about the cancer? I asked, though part of me had already suspected as much. I think the situation may be less dire than they claimed, Jeffrey said carefully. Or they're exaggerating the costs to justify the amount they're demanding. Either way, their credibility is shot, and you have legal protection now. If they violate the order, call the police immediately. Don't engage, don't respond, just document and report. I drove back to my office, where a mountain of work waited. But I could not focus. Despite the legal victory, despite the clarity of the judge's ruling, something felt unfinished. They had invaded my life, weaponized my sister against me, and attempted to access my child. A restraining order was protection, but it was not consequence. It was defense, not offense. That evening, I did something I had not done in 7 years. I logged into the social media account I maintained but rarely used, and I looked at my parents' profiles not with the passive curiosity of previous years, but with the analytical focus I applied to business problems. Dad's profile showed a man who presented himself as a devoted family man, posting frequently about his life with Patricia and Melissa. Photos of camping trips and holiday dinners, status updates about being blessed and grateful. The performance was elaborate and consistent. But when I looked closer, details emerged that contradicted the image. Patricia worked as an administrative assistant at a small marketing firm. Dad had recently changed jobs, his LinkedIn profile showing he was now at his 4th company in 7 years, each position lasting shorter than the last. Melissa worked part-time at the dental office but appeared to have no other income source. And despite their claims of drowning in medical bills, recent photos showed a vacation to Arizona 3 months ago and new furniture that appeared expensive. I pulled up property records. They rented a house in a decent Denver suburb, but the rent was high for their apparent combined income. I searched for bankruptcy filings and found nothing, which was interesting if they were truly drowning in debt. I checked court records for medical liens or judgments, and found one small judgment from 2 years ago that had been satisfied. The picture that emerged was not of a family destroyed by medical catastrophe, but of people living beyond their means, making poor financial choices, and looking for an easy solution to self-created problems. They had discovered I was successful, and decided I was obligated to subsidize their lifestyle choices. My phone rang. Rachel, my oldest friend and the person who had let me sleep on her couch 7 years ago, was calling. I answered with genuine warmth. "Tell me you destroyed them in court," she demanded without preamble. "Permanent restraining orders against all 3 of them," I confirmed. The judge was not sympathetic to their abandonment followed by demands for money approach. "Good. Those people are parasites. But Victoria, I need to tell you something. Melissa has been posting about you on social media. Really ugly stuff about how you're letting your mother die, how you're greedy and heartless, how you turned your back on family. She's tagged you in several posts, and people who don't know the real story are commenting that you're horrible." I pulled up my laptop and navigated to Melissa's profile. Rachel was right. Multiple posts over the past week painted me as a villain who had abandoned her dying mother out of spite. She had shared photos from the baby shower with captions about how I had everything while my family had nothing. Comments from people I did not know called me selfish, cruel, and disgusting. Several people had looked up my company and left negative reviews online, claiming I was morally bankrupt. "She's trying to destroy your reputation," Rachel continued. "Some of these posts are getting shared pretty widely. You need to protect yourself." I read through the comments with clinical detachment, noting which ones threatened my professional reputation versus which ones were simply online noise. The negative company reviews were a problem. The public attacks were uncomfortable but manageable. But the narrative Melissa was building, that I was a successful woman cruelly abandoning her poor, sick family, could cause real damage if it gained traction. "I'm going to handle this," I told Rachel calmly. "Let her build her story. The truth is more interesting." After we hung up, I made a decision that Jeffrey would probably advise against. I was going to control the narrative before it controlled me. And I was going to make sure that anyone who heard Melissa's version would also hear mine, with documentation they could not dispute. I spent the weekend building my response with the same meticulous attention I applied to strategic planning at work. Every claim Melissa made in her social media attacks would be addressed with documented facts. Every tear-jerking story about poor family struggling while cruel daughter prospered would be countered with timeline and evidence. If she wanted to wage a public relations war, I would bring receipts. Monday morning, I posted a single message on my rarely used social media account, making it public rather than friends only. The post was long, detailed, and impossible to dismiss as vindictive ranting, because every sentence included supporting documentation. My name is Victoria Reed. Over the past 2 weeks, my sister has been posting that I'm a heartless monster who abandoned our dying mother. Let me provide context that Melissa has conveniently omitted. In 2018, when I was 19 years old and pregnant, my parents gave me an ultimatum: terminate my pregnancy or lose their financial support. When I chose to continue the pregnancy, my father moved to Colorado with his girlfriend, taking my then 13-year-old sister with him. My mother followed days later. I was left alone in an apartment I could no longer afford, with 60 days until eviction, while pregnant with their first grandchild. I have attached the eviction notice from that period, dated 3 weeks after my parents left. The notice is addressed to David and Patricia Reed because the lease was in their names. I was not on the lease because I was their dependent minor child who had just aged out of their care. For 7 years, my parents had zero contact with me or my daughter. 0 birthday cards, 0 Christmas calls, 0 acknowledgement that their granddaughter existed. During this time, I worked multiple jobs, completed my college degree online while working full-time, and built a career in technology. I received no child support from my daughter's father, no assistance from family, and no apology from the parents who abandoned me when I was most vulnerable. 3 weeks ago, exactly 36 hours after my sister posted photographs from her baby shower at my apartment showing my home's lake view and renovated kitchen, my father called for the first time in 7 years. He did not ask how I was doing. He did not apologize for the abandonment. He immediately asked for $60,000 for my mother's cancer treatment. When I refused, the harassment began. My father obtained my work email and sent multiple messages to my professional account. My mother attempted to access my residential building by claiming a family emergency, requiring security to escort her out. Most seriously, my sister attempted to remove my 7-year-old daughter from school without authorization, claiming she needed to take her to see her dying grandmother. I have attached the school incident report documenting this attempted unauthorized pickup. I have attached screenshots of messages from all 3 family members after I refused their financial demands. I have attached the cease and desist letters my attorney sent. And I have attached the restraining order granted last week by Cook County Court, which found their harassment serious enough to warrant legal protection. My sister is now claiming on social media that I am cruel for refusing to help my dying mother. Let me be clear about what I refused. I refused to reward 7 years of abandonment with immediate financial bailout. I refused to allow people who considered me worthless when I was poor to extract money from me now that I'm successful. I refused to let my daughter be used as an emotional hostage. And I refuse to accept that biological relation creates unlimited obligation regardless of behavior. If my mother is truly ill, I am sorry for her suffering. Illness is terrible regardless of who experiences it. But her illness does not erase 7 years of voluntary absence from her daughter and granddaughter's lives. It does not create obligation where none existed when she walked away. And it does not entitle her to demand tens of thousands of dollars from the child she abandoned. To those who have been commenting on my sister's posts, calling me heartless, I built a life from nothing after my family threw me away. I worked overnight shifts with a newborn strapped to my chest. I finished my degree while working 70-hour weeks. I climbed from poverty to stability through years of sacrifice my family knows nothing about because they chose not to be present for any of it. My heart is just fine. It simply no longer includes people who proved they didn't value me until I became useful to them. This will be my only public statement on this matter. The court has spoken. The legal boundaries are established. Anyone continuing to spread false narratives about this situation is welcome to review the attached documentation. I attached 15 documents: the eviction notice, the school incident report, redacted bank statements showing my income history, the restraining order, screenshots of harassing messages, and a timeline showing 7 years of zero contact, followed by immediate demands for money. Each document was dated, notarized where applicable, and presented with clinical precision. Then I tagged my company's official account, my professional network, and 3 news organizations that covered technology industry stories. I tagged family members on both sides who might see Melissa's posts, and I tagged every single person who had commented negatively on Melissa's accusations, forcing them to confront documentation that contradicted the story they had believed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 2 hours, my post had been shared over 3,000 times. Comments flooded in, almost universally supportive once people saw the documented timeline. Several people who had left negative reviews on my company's page deleted them and apologized. Technology industry publications picked up the story, framing it as an example of young women overcoming adversity to achieve success despite family betrayal. Melissa's post suddenly looked very different when viewed alongside my documentation. People who had called me heartless in her comment sections began commenting on my post instead, apologizing for judging without full information. Several pointed out that Melissa had deliberately omitted the 7-year abandonment from her narrative, making her claims of family loyalty ring hollow. By evening, Melissa had deleted all her posts about me, but screenshots existed, preserved by people who wanted to document the before and after. Her social media accounts went private. Patricia's account disappeared entirely. Dad's account remained public, but comments on his family man posts now included people questioning his parenting choices and pointing him to my documented timeline. My phone rang. Jeffrey, likely calling to scold me for engaging publicly despite his advice to maintain silence. I answered, prepared for his lecture. That was either brilliant or incredibly reckless, he said without preamble. I'm genuinely not sure which. They were destroying my professional reputation with lies, I explained. I needed to control the narrative with facts. You succeeded. Half my firm has seen your post by now. The legal community is small, and everyone loves a good receipts-backed takedown. But Victoria, you've essentially gone nuclear on these people. There's no walking this back. I don't want to walk it back, I said firmly. They invaded my life, tried to exploit my success, and attempted to access my child. They deserve exactly what they're getting: public accountability for their choices. Fair enough. Just be prepared for escalation. People who are publicly humiliated sometimes do desperate things. Make sure your building security is tight and keep documenting everything. That night, I stood at my windows watching the city lights and feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The truth was out there now, documented and undeniable. Anyone who searched my name would find my story, not Melissa's version. The professional damage was contained. The legal protection was established. But I knew Jeffrey was right about escalation. Desperate people who had been publicly exposed would not simply accept defeat. They would regroup, recalculate, and try a different approach. The question was what form that approach would take and how prepared I needed to be to defend against it. The escalation came on a Wednesday morning, 3 weeks after my documented post had gone viral and permanently associated my parents' names with the phrase family abandonment. I arrived at my office to find my assistant looking worried, which immediately put me on alert. Jennifer had worked for me for 2 years and never looked worried. Victoria, there's a woman in the lobby claiming to be your mother, Jennifer said quietly. Building security stopped her from coming up, but she's refusing to leave. She says she's dying and needs to speak with you before she loses the courage. She's making quite a scene. I pulled up the security camera feed on my phone. Mom sat in the lobby, her appearance even more frail than the photos had suggested. She was crying, clutching tissues, and speaking to the security guard with animated desperation. A small crowd of office workers had gathered, their expressions sympathetic to the weeping older woman being blocked by stern security. She's violating the restraining order, I noted calmly. Call the police and have her arrested. Jennifer hesitated. Victoria, she really does look sick, and there are a lot of people watching. If we have the police drag a crying elderly woman out of the building, it's going to look bad regardless of the legal justification. She's counting on that, I replied. She's weaponizing her appearance and public sympathy to force a confrontation I've explicitly established legal boundaries against. Call the police. Or, Jennifer suggested carefully, you could go down there with security present, tell her clearly and publicly that she's violating a court order, and document her refusal to leave. That way, witnesses hear your side before the police arrive. It was tactically sound advice. I took the elevator down with Jennifer and building security, my phone recording as we approached. Mom saw me coming and immediately launched into her performance, standing and reaching toward me with trembling hands. Victoria, please, just 5 minutes. I need to explain. I need you to understand how sick I really am. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months left, and I can't die without making things right with you. You are violating a restraining order, I stated clearly, keeping my voice professional and loud enough for the gathered office workers to hear. You are legally prohibited from contacting me or coming to my workplace. This building's security has documentation of that order. By being here, you are committing a criminal act. I don't care about orders, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. I'm your mother. I gave birth to you. Doesn't that count for anything? You gave birth to me and then abandoned me when I was 19 and pregnant, I replied, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. You chose your husband's girlfriend over your daughter and grandchild. You had 7 years to make things right. You chose to do so only when you discovered I had money you could access. That timing tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. A woman in business attire who had been watching spoke up. She's your mother and she's dying. How can you be so cold? I turned to face the crowd directly, still recording. This woman and her husband abandoned me when I was a pregnant teenager. For 7 years, she had no contact with me or my daughter. She remembered I existed exactly when my sister posted photos showing I had become financially successful. She is now violating a court order designed to protect me from harassment. If you think that makes me cold, I would invite you to consider what kind of parent abandons their teenage daughter and then demands money 7 years later. Mom collapsed back into her chair, sobbing. I was wrong. I know I was wrong. I'm trying to make amends. Why won't you let me make amends? Because your amends came with a price tag of $60,000, I said coldly. Because your reconciliation started with demands for money. Because you attempted to access my workplace, my home, and my daughter's school when I refused those demands. You're not trying to make amends. You're trying to manipulate me into funding your lifestyle through guilt and public sympathy. Police sirens were audible outside. Mom's eyes widened with genuine fear as 2 officers entered the building. Building security immediately approached them with the restraining order documentation. The senior officer reviewed the papers and then looked at my mother with an expression that had shifted from neutral to disappointed. Ma'am, you're in violation of a court order, the officer stated. You need to come with us. I just wanted to see my daughter, Mom pleaded, looking at the officers with tear-filled eyes. I'm dying. Is that really a crime? Violating a restraining order is a crime, yes, the officer confirmed. Ma'am, please stand up and come with us peacefully. As they escorted Mom out in handcuffs, she looked back at me with an expression of pure hatred that shattered any remaining doubt about her motivation. This was not a misguided mother desperate for reconciliation. This was a woman furious that her target had refused to be victimized. The office workers dispersed, some looking thoughtful, others uncomfortable. Jennifer touched my arm gently. Are you okay? I'm fine, I assured her. Make sure building security includes this incident in their report and sends me copies of all video footage. I want everything documented. Back in my office, I forwarded the security footage and my phone recording to Jeffrey with a brief message. Mom violated the order. Arrested at my workplace. Full documentation attached. His response came within minutes. This strengthens your case significantly. She just demonstrated that the restraining order was necessary and that she's willing to break the law to continue harassing you. The arrest made local news that evening. Several outlets ran the story with headlines like, Woman arrested for violating restraining order at daughter's workplace. My carefully documented social media post was referenced in every article, providing context that prevented the story from being framed as heartless daughter has dying mother arrested. Instead, the narrative became, Woman who abandoned pregnant teenager arrested for harassment 7 years later. Mom was released that evening on bond with additional restrictions added to the restraining order. The judge who handled her arraignment apparently had read the previous court filings and was not sympathetic to her claims of maternal desperation. The new order prohibited her from being within 1,000 feet of any location where I might be present, including a list of specific addresses. Violation would result in immediate imprisonment with no bond. That should have ended it. But 2 days later, I received an email from an unknown address with the subject line, You'll regret this. The message contained threats against my career, vague implications about my daughter's safety, and accusations that I had used my wealth to manipulate the legal system against innocent people who only wanted family connection. I forwarded it immediately to Jeffrey and the police. The police traced it to a library computer in Denver, but could not definitively prove who had sent it. The timing and content made it obvious, but obvious was not the same as legally provable. Then my company received a formal complaint, alleging that I had used corporate resources for personal vendettas, citing my social media posts that had tagged the company account. HR called me in for a meeting that felt like a formality, but still required me to defend decisions I had made to protect myself from harassment. We support you completely, my HR director assured me after reviewing all the documentation. but we need to address the complaint formally to protect the company from any accusations of bias. Can you walk me through your decision-making process when you posted publicly?" I explained the escalating harassment, the damage to my professional reputation from Melissa's false posts, and my decision to address the situation with documented facts, rather than allowing lies to define me. I showed her the negative reviews that had been left on the company's pages before my post, and the fact that those reviews had been removed after people saw the documentation proving the accusations were false. "So your post actually protected the company's reputation by providing context for harassment-based negative reviews," she summarized. "That's a strong argument. I'll document this conversation and close the complaint as unsubstantiated." But the complaint itself was telling. Someone was systematically trying to damage my professional standing, understanding that my career was the foundation of the security that made me untouchable. If they could not guilt me into funding their lives, they would try to destroy the success that made me an unsuitable victim. That evening, I sat down with Sophia and had a conversation I had hoped to avoid for a few more years. She was 7, smart, and increasingly aware that something was wrong despite my efforts to shield her from adult drama. "Mom, why were the police at your building?" she asked, her dark eyes serious. "My friend Carrie's mom told her she saw it on the news and now Carrie thinks you're in trouble." I pulled her onto my lap, choosing words carefully. "Remember how I told you that my parents and I had a disagreement a long time ago, before you were born? And how we haven't seen them in a very long time?" She nodded, her small hands playing with the buttons on my shirt. "Because they weren't nice to you when you needed help." "Exactly. Well, recently they found out where we live and where I work, and they've been trying to talk to me even though I asked them not to. The police helped me explain that they need to respect my decision to not have them in our life." "Are they bad people?" Sophia asked with the direct honesty of childhood. I considered the question carefully. "They're people who made choices I don't agree with, and who are now facing consequences for those choices. The important thing is that you and I are safe, and no one is going to bother us anymore." "Good," she said firmly, then brightened. "Can we have mac and cheese for dinner?" The resilience of children never ceased to amaze me. We made mac and cheese, watched her favorite movie, and existed in our protected bubble while outside our walls. People who shared our DNA plotted their next move in a war they could not win, because they had miscalculated fundamentally. They thought my success made me vulnerable to their demands. They thought shame and public opinion would force me to comply. They thought family obligation would override self-preservation. They were wrong on every count. And now they were facing systematic legal, social, and reputational consequences for their 7-year abandonment, followed by harassment campaign. The restraining orders were in place. The documentation was public. The narrative was controlled. All that remained was ensuring they understood that continued attacks would result in escalating consequences until they had nothing left to lose. 6 months after Mom's arrest at my workplace, I stood in my home office reviewing the final settlement documents with Jeffrey. My parents had filed for bankruptcy 3 weeks earlier, listing medical debt that turned out to be significantly less than the $60,000 they had claimed to need. The bankruptcy trustee had contacted my attorney as part of asset investigation, asking if I had any claim against the estate. "I told them you had no interest in their assets and no claim to file," Jeffrey explained. But the trustee found it interesting that they had rented a house well beyond their means, leased 2 new cars they couldn't afford, and taken multiple vacations in the 2 years before declaring bankruptcy. The medical debt exists, but it's about $15,000, not $60,000. The bulk of their financial crisis is self-created lifestyle debt, so they lied about the severity of Mom's illness to justify the amount they were demanding. I summarized without surprise. "Not entirely. She does have cancer, but it's stage 1, not stage 3. Her prognosis is actually quite good with standard treatment covered mostly by insurance. They inflated both the severity and the cost to create urgency and maximize the amount they could extract from you." I thought about Mom's frail appearance in my building lobby, the performance she had crafted to generate sympathy. Some of it had been genuine illness, but much of it had been theatrical exaggeration designed to weaponize her condition. The manipulation was breathtaking in its callousness. "Melissa lost her apartment last month," Jeffrey continued, consulting his notes. "She's moved back in with your parents. The dental office let her go after the baby was born because her attendance was unreliable. She's filed for emergency assistance and is living on government support programs." "And Dad?" I asked, though I already knew the trajectory of someone who changed jobs every 18 months. "Unemployed. His last employer terminated him for cause, which makes unemployment benefits complicated. He's working as a rideshare driver while looking for another sales position, but his age and job history are working against him. The complete collapse of their lives should have generated some feeling in me. Sympathy, guilt, even satisfaction. Instead, I felt nothing but distant observation. These were strangers who had made catastrophically bad choices and were experiencing the natural consequences. Their suffering was not my responsibility or my concern. Patricia left, Jeffrey added, flipping to another page. Filed for divorce 3 months ago, citing financial infidelity and emotional abuse. She took the car and what little savings existed. Your father is alone in that rental house he can't afford, facing eviction next month. And they blame me for all of this, I stated rather than asked. They do. The angry emails continue, though always from new addresses that get blocked immediately. They've tried contacting your company twice more, both times resulting in police reports. They've attempted to reach you through various intermediaries who all report back that you've maintained firm boundaries. The restraining orders remain in place for another 18 months. I reviewed the timeline Jeffrey had prepared. 7 years of absence, 3 weeks of harassment, 6 months of consequences. The math was brutally clear. They had destroyed in 3 weeks what could have been a cautious reconnection if they had approached with genuine remorse instead of immediate financial demands. What about Melissa's baby? I asked, the question prompted by curiosity rather than familial concern. Healthy girl, born 2 months ago. Melissa named her Victoria. That information landed with unexpected weight. She had named her daughter after the sister she had helped betray, either as a last-ditch manipulation attempt or as some twisted form of tribute. Either motivation was disturbing. I want you to set something up, I told Jeffrey after a moment of consideration. A trust fund for Melissa's daughter. $50,000, invested conservatively, accessible only for education expenses when she turns 18. Melissa can't touch it. My parents can't touch it. It exists solely for that child's future educational opportunities. Jeffrey raised an eyebrow. That's surprisingly generous given everything that's happened. It's not generosity, I corrected. It's ensuring that an innocent child doesn't suffer for her mother's choices the way I suffered for mine. That baby didn't choose her family. She deserves a chance to escape them if she's smart enough to take it. I'll set it up through a third-party trustee so there's no direct connection to you. Jeffrey agreed. Melissa will be notified of the trust's existence but won't know it came from you specifically. The documentation will state only that it's from a private donor. Over the following weeks, I watched from a distance as my parents' situation continued deteriorating. Dad lost the rental house and moved into a studio apartment in a cheaper area of Denver. Melissa moved into subsidized housing for single mothers. Mom's cancer treatment continued successfully, which meant she would live to experience the full consequences of her choices, rather than escaping through convenient martyrdom. The hate mail continued sporadically but with decreasing frequency, as they apparently realized I would never respond. Several mutual acquaintances reached out to tell me my father had been asking about me, wondering if I had softened, whether reconciliation might be possible. I told each one the same thing. The restraining orders remain in place. I have no interest in contact, and anyone who attempts to facilitate communication would be cut off immediately. Sophia turned 8 and started 3rd grade, completely unaware of the extended family drama that had consumed months of my attention. She made honor roll, joined the school's art club, and asked increasingly sophisticated questions about how businesses work. She had my eyes and my drive, but none of my early naivete about family obligation. That lesson, at least, she would never need to learn through painful experience. Tyler, the boyfriend I had been seeing casually for 9 months, proposed on the anniversary of the restraining order hearing. We were having dinner at home, Sophia already asleep, when he placed a small box on the table between us. I've watched you handle the worst family situation imaginable with grace and strength, he said simply. I've seen you protect your daughter while building a career and refusing to let toxic people define you. I want to spend my life with someone that remarkable. What do you say? I said yes, understanding that this was what real family looked like. People who showed up consistently, people who supported without demanding, people who chose you every day, not just when it was convenient or profitable. The wedding was small, immediate family only, which meant Sophia, Rachel, and a handful of close friends. My parents did not know it was happening. Melissa remained blocked on all platforms. The family who mattered was present. The family who had abandoned me existed only as cautionary tales I would someday share with Sophia about the importance of choosing people wisely. 1 year after the restraining order was granted, I received a letter forwarded through Jeffrey's office. Dad's handwriting on the envelope made it clear who had sent it, despite the lack of return address. Jeffrey had reviewed it before forwarding, ensuring it contained no threats or harassment. "Victoria," it began, "I know you don't want to hear from me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to understand that I'm sorry. Not sorry because we're struggling financially, though we are. Sorry because I failed you when you needed me most. I was wrong to give you an ultimatum about your pregnancy. I was wrong to leave when you chose to keep your daughter. I was wrong to stay away for 7 years. And I was catastrophically wrong to approach you with demands for money when we finally made contact. I destroyed any chance of real reconciliation because I let financial desperation override what should have been genuine remorse. You've built an incredible life without us. You've raised an amazing daughter alone. You've succeeded in every way I predicted you would fail. I was wrong about all of it, and I'm sorry for all of it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to respond. I just needed you to know that I understand now what I failed to understand then. You were never the one who needed to change. We were, and we didn't. That's on us. I hope you and Sophia have wonderful lives. You deserve every happiness, Dad." I read the letter twice, looking for manipulation or hidden agenda. It seemed genuinely remorseful, absent any requests or expectations. The apology I might have desperately needed 7 years ago now felt like too little, too late. It changed nothing about the choices made or the consequences experienced. I filed the letter away without responding. Silence was answer enough. 2 years after the initial confrontation, my company promoted me to Senior Vice President of Operations. The announcement included a profile piece about my journey from teenage single mother to technology executive. The article mentioned briefly that I had overcome family challenges in my early 20s, but focused primarily on professional achievements and innovative management strategies I had implemented. The profile was picked up by several business publications and eventually led to speaking invitations at conferences about women in technology and overcoming adversity. I accepted selectively, telling my story in professional forums where it might inspire others facing similar situations. The narrative was always the same. Family betrayal, followed by determined independence, followed by success built through competence rather than connections. I never mentioned my parents by name in these talks. But anyone who had followed the story 2 years earlier could connect the dots. The documentation remained available online for anyone curious enough to search. The truth existed in permanent digital record, preventing any future attempts to rewrite history. Melissa's daughter, Victoria, turned 2 the same month my company announced a merger that would triple the value of my stock options. I thought about that little girl growing up in the chaos of my sister's life, wondered if she would someday face the same choice I had, escape or surrender. The trust fund I had established would give her options Melissa never had: education fully funded, independent of her family's dysfunction. Whether she was wise enough to take advantage of it would be her decision, but the opportunity would exist. My anonymous gift to a child who shared my name, and hopefully none of my early mistakes. I never told Sophia about the trust fund. Some acts of grace are diminished by acknowledgement. The child would discover it when she was old enough to understand, and by then, my role in her opportunity would be irrelevant compared to what she chose to do with it. On Sophia's 10th birthday, I showed her the eviction notice from 2018, the document that had started everything. She was old enough now to understand dates and timeline, to grasp what it meant that her grandparents had left us homeless when she was still growing inside me. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, studying the paper with serious concentration. "Because someday people might tell you that family comes first no matter what," I explained. "They might say you owe loyalty to people just because you share DNA. I want you to understand that loyalty is earned through actions, not deserved through biology. These people abandoned us when we needed them. They came back only when we didn't need them anymore. That taught me who they really were." "Are you sad that they're not in our life?" Sophia asked, her dark eyes searching my face. "No," I answered honestly. "I'm grateful. They showed me clearly that I could survive without them, which meant I never had to wonder whether I was strong enough. That's a valuable lesson, even if it came painfully." She nodded thoughtfully, then carefully folded the eviction notice and handed it back to me. "Can we have cake now?" We had cake, celebrated her birthday with actual family chosen and earned, and continued building our life in the space where obligation ended and authentic connection began. My parents remained in Denver, living their diminished lives. Melissa raised her daughter in subsidized housing, working whatever jobs she could find with an infant at home. They existed in the consequences of choices made during 3 desperate weeks when they had decided their financial crisis justified harassment, manipulation, and violation of boundaries. I existed in the success built over 7 years of rejection, proving every day that their predictions about my ruined life were the fantasies of people who confused financial leverage with parental wisdom. The restraining orders eventually expired, but the boundaries remained. I never contacted them. They occasionally attempted contact through new email addresses or social media accounts, each attempt documented and blocked without response. The pattern was clear. They would take whatever access I permitted and use it to resume harassment. So I permitted nothing. Justice Mitchell had been right during that hearing 2 years ago. They had chosen to sever the relationship when I was 19 and vulnerable. They didn't get to resurrect it selectively when circumstances changed. Family was built through consistent care, not biological accident. They had abdicated their role. The vacancy would remain permanent. Years would pass. Sophia would grow into a remarkable young woman. My career would continue advancing. My marriage would provide the stable partnership my parents' relationship had never modeled, and somewhere in Denver, 3 people would continue experiencing the consequences of believing that abandonment could be erased with apologies motivated by financial desperation. They made their choice 7 years ago. They confirmed it 3 weeks into their reappearance. Now they would live with it forever, exactly as they had told me to do when they walked away. That seemed fair.